What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to break down what's happening with the market moving forward as we're seeing some new developments, not to mention the election for tonight. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. SPY is doing a good job at pushing very, very nicely. We're trying to fill this gap up above as we're seeing more buyers continuing to step in. Now, if we were to turn bearish, we would be looking to potentially lose the 575 area, but so far it's looking very, very unlikely, and this chart is favoring upside for the election. Now, there are other factors that will affect whether or not that happens. That's why I want to break down more details about the other factors before I break down the charts. Just know this, the market attempted to rebound today, a big flip-flop compared to what we saw yesterday. The market was very fearful about the election, and there were other factors causing a bit of a dip, only for buyers to return right as the election is about to start because they are looking a little bit more optimistic. Now, just know this, right now, Nvda had about a 2.8% day. We also saw others out there trying to bounce, like the Teslas out there. We saw consumer durables, not to mention tech, trying to push. And that's what led the market higher, especially the QQQ and the NASDAQ and many others out there. So for now, we are seeing buyers defending, but whether or not this continues depends on some other factors. Let's talk about those. Today, we had the ISM services data come out. Everything was very close to expectations. Not bad whatsoever. But later on today, we have something else that's even bigger, and that's going to be the presidential election. I do expect a very big reaction tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday. There's not really much data coming out, by the way, but there's going to be a big reaction to the election if we do end up getting the results by tonight. So what I mean by that is this. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer to get the results as they're counting the ballots. It may not come until like tomorrow. Sometimes that happens. Hopefully, we get the main results by tonight. I'm really hoping that ends up being the case. And we'll see how things end up going. So we have these two candidates. We have Harris and Trump. It could go either way. If we get a Trump victory, this would be especially bullish for Tesla and Bitcoin. And the whole market would likely try to push. If we get a Harris victory, the market does look like it wants to push through that as well, but some tickers may not be as bullish, whereas others would be, right? So some tech stocks like Google would do relatively well, but then others out there like Tesla, after what Elon Musk has said and who he's endorsing, could actually see a little bit of a complicated reaction despite that. Same thing with Bitcoin, might have a very complicated reaction. We'll have to see about that. So we'll be very, very patient with this nonetheless. But overall, the market might actually still try to push regardless of who wins because that's what it's looking like so far. That's why it's very important to be open-minded to anything. And just know that for now, technicals do favor the upside despite that. When it comes to the candidates, they have different policy proposals. One of them wants to increase tariffs a lot more on China, whereas the other isn't as fixated on that. And then also there's going to be different tax plans, different regulatory policies as well, which will affect a lot of companies. We'll see how that ends up going, and we'll see what the reaction is for the broader markets. So far, though, looking at the technicals, the market does look a little bit more bullish going into tomorrow. We'll see if that ends up being the case. All right, so as far as the market goes, we were even more fearful yesterday. It was actually slowing down a little bit. We're now very close to neutral. So the market is shifting its overall sentiment a bit. Looking at momentum, after the bounce we just got today, we're now neutral. So the market is seeing momentum kind of shift a little bit. And then the puts and call option ratio remains extremely fearful because there's a lot more put buying that's going on. There's a lot more people buying shorts ahead of the election. Could this lead to a squeeze tomorrow? It's always a possibility. Looks a little bit more probable to me considering the fact that there's all these people buying puts. People are betting the market's going to dump after the election. And if anything, so far it's been the opposite. The VIX has been dipping a bit. It could be approaching its 50 daily moving average. We're not quite there yet. So we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. So that being said, that's what we're seeing, at least in terms of that. Now let's talk about some other factors out here. We basically just had Supermicro announcing its earnings. They're not doing that great because things were not that strong for them. And then for tomorrow, we have Celsius, CVS, not to mention ARM or ARM, and a few more. Then we have DraftKings, Moderna, Rivian, and a few more names on Thursday. But that's what's happening for earnings. Why is Supermicro down? Because of these two factors. Number one, when it comes to their earnings, EPS was I think it was a beat. They basically had about 75, 76 cents. That's the adjusted EPS. That is once again above expectations. But revenue, you guys can see it right here. Revenue came in at about 5.9 billion to about 6 billion, which was below the expectation of 6.44 billion. And then their outlook wasn't that strong. You guys can see right over here. They basically told us that they are guiding for a quarter in the range of about 5.5 to 6.1 billion dollars in sales versus the 6.84 billion estimate from analysts. So that's why the share price dumped quite a bit. They also gave us the fiscal guidance for 2025, which is still not that great. That's something else that's worth noting. I'm sorry, they did that. They did that back in August. That's when they gave us their guidance, which still, isn't as great as what many people were expecting. So, in my personal opinion, because of the fact that they missed on revenue and because of the fact that their overall earnings were not that strong, especially guidance for the end of the year, the share price of Supermicro is dumping. It's going to likely continue to that tomorrow. So now let's talk about what's happening with the market. What do I think is going to pan out? My view is starting to shift now. I think that regardless of who ends up winning the election, the market's going to most likely try to push to fill this gap. But just to be safe, make sure you watch the levels I'm about to call out. So if SPY loses 575 tomorrow and we can't hold above that, I do anticipate we're going to be dumping back down to at least 572 or below. And as long as we're above 575, we have potential to try to push back up to these resistance areas. 575.96 is the main resistance. As long as we're above that, this is favoring an attempt to fill this gap, pushing up towards 580. Do I know for sure if that's going to happen? I can't promise that, guys. I'm not saying with 100% certainty that's going to be the case. It depends on what kind of reaction we get from the election. That is still to be determined. But so far, technicals and the setup does favor that SPY is going to attempt to get right back up there towards that resistance, towards the higher levels. So that's looking very, very probable so far. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But for now, we're seeing some buyers continuing to step in, which is once again helping the way that this is moving. For other factors out there, as SPY is trying to push here, we'll see if we end up breaking past resistance or not. But the most likely possibility is we see 580 tomorrow, regardless of who ends up winning. Yes, it could be a different pump. Maybe the pump could be, more or less depending on the candidate that wins. But so far, it looks like regardless of who wins, that's how the market's kind of viewing this, especially because so many people are piling into shorts. Now, for ES, we have something very similar going on. Looking at the levels, it's kind of tight right over here, but just check this out, guys. It looks more bullish. Now, we have 58.15 as our main support. As long as we're above this, this is favoring a push for at least 58.52. It's a nice pump that could be coming tomorrow, not too far from all-time highs. If we lose 5,800, though, we're looking for an attempt to get back down to about 57.80 and eventually 57.50 as our main supports. My gut is telling me that this chart is technically favoring the upside. So yes, could be going to fill this gap up towards 58.50 as a very, very good target. So I think the odds are favoring upside right now looking at this new development. I think there's a very, very good chance it's going to try to continue that push. For other factors out there, just know that the election will affect this. As long as we don't lose 5,800, I think there's a very, very good chance we try to fill this gap at the very least. And that looks a little bit more favorable to me until we see another reaction after that. For Nvda, we look more bullish right now. If we're bearish after the election, you want to see it lose basically 138. If that fails us, I'll be looking for 135 as our target, especially this gap down here. If we're bullish, you want to see this push all the way up towards 140. If it breaks, now we're looking for these highs to be tested. 142 to 144 is coming. Could go either way. Nvidia is a little bit more complicated because it does involve a lot of overseas transactions, which could be affected by tariffs. So we'll see what the reaction is. It does look a little bit more bullish to me, but we'll see just to be safe. For Bitcoin, Bitcoin is attempting to push. Let me just call out the fact that we're going to get a much bigger push if we get a Trump victory. So if Trump wins, this is going to easily start flying to these highs, 74,000 or so. If he doesn't win, we might see a small dip. I do see there's a risk of that potentially coming, maybe a small push, maybe a dip afterwards. It won't run as much if Kamala Harris wins. Just initially, we're just talking about tomorrow and the short term. For the medium term over the next few years, whether it's Kamala that's president or Trump, it's going to continue to run nonetheless. So just keep that in mind. For other factors out there, we have Tesla. Tesla is in the middle. We did push very nicely to 255. If we get that Trump victory, we're looking for the 260s, especially like 262 or so. If we don't get that Trump victory because Elon Musk has been endorsing Trump, This will likely be dipping back down towards the 240s, especially where this gap happens to be around 244. So we could be looking for a lot of consolidation, maybe a little bit of a push if Kamala wins, then a dip back down, and some consolidation because there would be some weakness after everything that's been going on. So the chart looks like it wants to bounce. It is favoring a push for the 260s. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. For other factors out there, we also happen to have, we're going to go back to NQ. NQ looks more bullish. We're basically looking at 20,300 as the main support. If that fails us, we're going to be dipping all the way down to 20,200. The 20,000 flat would be the next target near the 50 EMA. If we're bullish, though, and if we end up breaking out and we hold above 20,300, we're looking for 20,500 as our target to fill this gap up above. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. Right now, the chart looks like it wants to go to 20,500, so we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. But that is what this chart is suggesting, so please keep that in mind. For the QQQ, it depends on who ends up winning, of course. Well, it depends on what kind of reaction we get to either a Trump or a Harris victory. But just know that this chart is favoring upside. If we were to lose 490.43, this will start dipping all the way down to where this imbalance is, towards 487. However, as long as we're above 490, this is favoring that it wants to go up towards 496 to fill the daily gap. So we could actually pump closer to 500 if we do end up getting a positive reaction, regardless of who ends up winning. So just keep that in mind. Apple as well, so far is doing a good job at holding up. The tariffs may affect them, so we'll see what kind of reaction it gets to a potential Trump victory. If Harris wins, it's going to likely, continue to hold up. So as long as we're above 220, though, this does favor that it wants to fill this gap back up towards about 225. But if we get a negative reaction, you want to see it basically dip back down towards 220. If that fails, we're going back down to about 216.5 to fill that gap. So lose 220, look for 216.5 for bearish after whoever ends up winning. If we're bullish, we're going to be going up to 225. Tariffs will be shifting, or at least there's going to be proposals to do that. So that could be a little bit of a shift in Apple. But so far, Apple does favor that it wants to bounce higher. For NEO, I want to call out that NEO looks a little bit weak here because of the fact that we have a very clean looking head and shoulders. If NEO ends up dipping, regardless of what happens with policy, if $5 fails us, I do think we have a gap to fill back down, and there is a risk of that. So just be very mindful of that. For Netflix is looking a little bit more bullish. If we lose for 755, we're looking for that gap fill all the way down, followed by the 750 area to be revisited. If we're bullish, we're looking for a push back up for 772. My gut tells me this is favoring upside for 772 or above. It depends on the election, of course, but for now, it looks a little bit more bullish. Celsius has earnings coming out. It did push exactly like I predicted yesterday. So if we were to lose 31 flat, we're looking for a dip back down towards 30.5. As long as we're above 31.7, we are favoring 32.5 and eventually all the way back up here towards 33.75. Now, yes, it does look like it should be pushing to at least 32.5, but this depends on earnings. So we'll just have to see what happens with the earnings right over here, especially on Wednesday. So just keep that in mind. For other factors out there, we have Palantir. Palantir is pumping quite a bit. We'll have to see if we can try to break out even higher, especially after earnings came out. They had good guidance, which is why the share price went up. So good guidance and good growth projections are helping this push. Could we go all the way up to 52 plus after the election, or do we end up losing 50 to start dumping back down for 48? It depends on the election, but so far we do look a little bit more bullish, technically speaking. Unfortunately, for Supermicro, we are down quite a bit. We're down 15% in the after hours. We're currently at 23 a share. It could be dipping close to where that shop zone happened to be. So we're at support at 23. If that fails us, we're looking for basically 21.5. It's a little bit weak, guys. Expect us to gap down tomorrow, and we'll see what it does. But just know because of earnings, it is down. Rivian has earnings on Thursday. It is looking a little bit more bullish, technically speaking. But if we end up losing 10.52, we could be dipping back down to about 10.3. As long as we're above 10.52, we're favoring a pushback up for 10.8. So we do look a little bit more bullish. For SoFi, we're on a bit of an uptrend right over here. We're favoring 11.5 plus. If that breaks, we're looking for basically 11.7 as our potential target, 11.75. If we end up losing 11 flat, expect to dip back down for 10.35. Technically speaking, it looks more bullish. Looks like it wants to be pushing for 11.75 plus. So it's favoring upside. We'll have to see what happens with the election, but it's still favoring that move. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're favoring 225, and then a break above that is going to be looking for 227.25, then 229. If we end up losing 225, we're looking for basically 224 to be retested, followed by 222. The chart looks more bullish. It's favoring upside as the most likely move, so we'll have to see how things end up going. For AMD, we are trying to base around 140. Could we get a bounce with the election or not? If it does bounce, we're looking for 145. And if not, we're looking for a dip back down towards 138. Overall, it's trying to base at 140, so give it some time to develop. We're just kind of shuffling here. We're waiting to see what the election causes. ARM has earnings very soon. It is favoring that it wants to be pushing back up to about 143. But if we can't hold 140, look for 137.5 as our support. It is favoring a bit of a push, though, so just keep that in mind as the most likely case. We have 195 as resistance on coin. If that breaks, we're looking for basically 200. If this rejects, we're looking for a dip back down towards 191.75, not to mention 188. But this is still trying to push higher, so give this the time it needs. I still think that there is potential in coin. If Trump wins, this is going to make an even bigger move to at least the 200s. If not, it could still try to push a bit, but might not be as strong. So we'll see about that. Amazon's fighting at 200. Don't forget, guys, Jeff Bezos is continuing to sell shares around 200 over and over and over again. I think he sold another $100 million worth, $100 million worth. I want to clarify that. But that is something worth noting. So this is going to be a tough resistance. Can we break through this after the election? It depends. 202 and 205 would be our targets. If not, we're looking for a retest of basically 197. So we'll see how it goes. Meta looks a little bit more bullish. If we break past 574, we're looking for basically the 580 area to be tested. If it rejects here, we're looking for 568. This is favoring upside, so give this the time it needs to develop. Microsoft is just trading in the middle. If we break past 415, we're looking more bullish. And if we end up losing 408, we turn back down. I am favoring 415 to be tested, though. It's doing a good job at holding up. Google's doing a good job as well. It does have potential to push back up for 174. If we lose 170, you're looking for a dip back down to 168. We're stuck in the middle. We'll have to see if we push from here, depending on if Harris wins or not. I think this is more dependent on Kamala Harris. So just keep that in mind. We'll see how that ends up going because of what's happening with antitrust laws and other regulations. For DJT, we'll see what the reaction is. Do we pump after, it depends on if Trump wins or not. Do we get a pump up to 45 plus, or do we get a rug pull all the way back below basically 32 to hit 32 to hit 28? We'll see about that. It's in the middle. The VIX already dumped, but now we're at our 50 EMA. Do we lose 20.15 and start dumping as the market pumps, or does this bounce off this and the market gets a rug pull? We'll have to see about that. The 10-year is dipping a bit as we're approaching the election, and the dollar is starting to dip, which tends to be bullish for the markets. So in a nutshell, the market is looking technically more bullish approaching the election. Does this mean we're going to pump forever? I can't guarantee anything, guys. We just have to wait and see how it goes. But just know it depends on the election, so we just have to wait and see and be very, very patient nonetheless. So get ready for the election, guys. I can't wait to see what the big reaction is going to be. I like to be very unbiased in this channel. And let me just say this. If you guys support Harris or if you support Trump, it's up to you. I will respect your opinion. You guys have the right to have an opinion. Whether it's the same or different from mine, that is completely fine. But I just want to say this. Please remember a couple of things, okay? For my global viewers, for people who are in different countries, please, guys, just know that I wish the best for everyone out there. I wish for peace around the world. And it's very important to know that, especially in the context of the election and everything that's happening around the world and how it's going to affect things. Additionally, for all my American viewers, okay, please remember to be peaceful and remember that we want a very, very fair and clean election. All right, whatever happens, it's not the end of the world. Okay, regardless of who wins, it's not the end of the world. It's not even like the most important thing in history. You and I are individuals. We can control our own selves, our own actions, and our own futures. We do have control over them. And I just want to wish you guys the best. And I hope you guys all stay safe during this whole election period. We will see what happens. Whatever happens, happens. Just accept it. And we just have to continue to improve ourselves and move on regardless of it. I believe that regardless of who wins, whether you like them or not, whether you like their policies or not, the future still remains bright as long as we stay true to ourselves, as long as we keep our heads up, as long as we never give up and we continue to improve, there's still a bright future for every single one of you guys. All right, so let's hope for the best. The election is coming. It's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. Get ready. Let's all be, friends and family here. We're all brothers and sisters, or etc. We're all in this together. We're all Americans. So let's just hope for the best and be together and make this as clean as possible. All right. So please have a great night, guys. Let's hope we get the election results by tonight. I really just want it to be done with. And whatever happens, happens. Just keep your heads up no matter what. I wish you all the best. Stay safe, guys. Have a good night, and I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow. Hopefully by tomorrow when I record my next video, the election results should be out, and we'll know who the next president of the United States is going to be. I wish the best for both sides and everyone out there. So take care, guys, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you for listening. Have a good night, and peace out.